Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Healthy Workplace, Understanding Discrimination, Your Rights and Responsibilities. I'm Stephanie Morawski from WorkSafe Tasmania, and I will be your moderator today. Before we start, I ask that you take a few moments to read the following slide about information received today. I will now go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's webinar. We have taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your computer in the upper right corner. You're listening in using your computer's speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presentation by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may also send in your questions at any time during the presentation. Questions will, however, be addressed at the end of today's webinar. You will also see a series of handouts listed in the handouts pane. These handouts will be referred in today's webinar by the presenter. We are also recording today's webinar. Recordings will be available at the end of WorkSafe Month on the WorkSafe Tasmania website. Also, at the close of today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we appreciate you providing us with your feedback. I would now like to introduce Jennie Gorringe, Senior Training, Education and Development Officer from Equal Opportunity Tasmania, to present today's webinar, Healthy Workplace, Understanding Discrimination, Your Rights and Responsibilities. Jennie grew up in rural Tasmania and has been a practicing artist, arts administrator, gaining a Bachelor of Fine Arts in 1990, a postgraduate degree in 1991 and a Masters of Fine Arts from the University of Tasmania. Jennie has worked extensively in the community sector in Tasmania and in New South Wales in family, domestic violence, as well as working for many years as a community cultural development worker in Aboriginal organisations and in local government. Jennie has worked as a trainer with the Tasmanian Health Service in chronic disease management in rural and remote health centres. In 2017, Jennie was employed as the Senior Trainer at Equal Opportunity Tasmania. Welcome, Jennie.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Welcome, everybody. Oh, I just need to go back there. Thank you for joining in on this session today. We will be going for around 30 minutes to around about 10:30, and then we have 10 minutes for questions. So one of the things about having a healthy workplace is actually understanding how the Tasmanian Discrimination Act actually works to make your workplace, or be a part of making your workplace a healthy place to work. That's what we're going to be focusing on and looking at today. As Stephanie actually outlined, you have received some handouts from us. You can always go to Equal Opportunity's website if you want further pamphlets. You can download them. We've also got some information that you can further download from the WorkSafe Tasmania website. That's specifically on the bullying guide and the bullying sample policy, which I will refer to throughout the session today. So, mentally healthy workplaces. When our workplaces are mentally healthy, we see enormous benefits to individuals, employees, and to the business itself. So it's a really important thing to do. We perform at our best when we have a high level of psychological well-being and job satisfaction. And that's a really important thing, that we are satisfied within our jobs and that our actual mental health and well-being is paramount to how we actually develop that. One of the things is, if we don't have mentally healthy workplaces, it can actually be quite costly. So the thing about having a mentally health workplace, it reduces staff turnover, recruitment and training costs, fewer sick days, greater productivity and creativity are all good for our business. And it also increases revenue and it decreases costs. So things like having a unproductive workplace where we keep recruiting is a very costly business. Work instills in us with a sense of purpose. It provides social networks and support. It gives opportunities to grow and develop and helps us to achieve in areas of strengths and what is important to us about how we actually are developing and how we actually build on the talents that we have and keep building on that throughout our working career. So a snapshot of Australian workplaces. 1 in 6 working age Australians are currently experiencing mental illness, most commonly depression and anxiety. And we know that this can really play out in our workplace. We have to think about how does our workplace actually support our staff. And one of the important things that we know, the base part of this is having really good communication, being very respectful at work. But unfortunately, we see that some workplaces are not good at doing this, and this causes a lot of anxiety within the workplace. If you work in a place with more than 10 people, there's a good chance at least 1 and 2 or 2 people in your team is living with a mental illness. Some of these things are about how we address that as managers and supervisors. Do we actually have team meetings that actually not necessarily point out those individual people, but creating that in supportive environment so people actually feel that they can get support. This could be through using your employment assistant program, making sure that people understand that they do have access to that it doesn't necessarily have to be a work issue. It could be personal issues that are coming up for you. It could be that you need to be looking at more flexible work hours as well. So all of these things are part of making a really healthy workplace for our staff across the board. So we do know the cost to workplaces around not dealing with mental health conditions like depression and anxiety are costing business between $11 and $12 billion throughout the year. So it's important that we address it. It is about looking at those things about making sure that people are supported within their workplaces, making sure that there is that flexibility within our workplaces. So it actually reduces staff turnover. It actually reduces maybe compensation claims. And one of the things that we see in equal opportunity a lot is that a lot of issues get just left. They're not nipped in the bud early on. And I think this is what we would say to people, keep that communication open. Don't actually get to that pointy end of the stick where maybe a complaint has gone in and then it's actually led to further compensation claims. So again, it's about having that awareness, making sure that your workplace keeps that communication open, but it's also around making sure that our policies and procedures really reflect the kind of values of our organisation as well. This is a bit of a thing that we say a lot, the impact, not the intent. Once can be enough for a complaint to come into equal opportunity. So our intent may be to have a joke with somebody, but that joke may be offensive to that person, and the impact could be that they don't want to work with you, that maybe they feel uncomfortable with you. So those things around those intent around jokes, around language are really, really important about what is our intent to do that, because we really at the end of the day know that a lot of jokes are They can be fun, but a lot of them are about putting somebody down as well. So a really important one to remember. So with the handouts that I've given you there, you do have one on who we are and what we do at Equal Opportunity. So we administer the Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Act. Each state and territories in Australia have their own Anti-Discrimination Act. They're similar, but there are some differences. So the Anti-Discrimination Act makes discrimination, offensive or humiliating conduct such as sexual harassment, inciting hatred is all against the law, and we have more areas that we cover as well. So this really is very clear. Discrimination is against the law. What do? Equal Opportunity, we deal with complaints. In 2018, we had 172 complaints come through and get up through our office. We usually have around 400 to 600 inquiries. We do training for private and public businesses and community groups. We did 208 in 2018. We work statewide, so we're based in Hobart, but we are able to travel across the state. Important thing to know that if you're going to be making a complaint, it is free to do so. You can make a complaint to Equal Opportunity anytime. This is one of the things that a lot of workers don't think about, is that they get really stuck with using their internal policies. You don't have to use your internal policies. You could make a complaint straight to us. That's an important thing to remember, because an issue could be with your manager or your supervisor, or you haven't actually been supported within your workplace to actually go through a more formal complaint process. So you can do that through us at any time. So one of the reasons why your organisations have obligations under the Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Act is because of Section 104 of the Act, and probably point 2 of that, an organisation is to take reasonable steps to ensure that no member, officer, employee or agent of the organisation engages in discrimination or prohibited conduct. And when we're talking about a member, officer, employee, that can be a volunteer, is covered under that. It can be a contractor in your organisation as well. It can be your management and employer. It could be a board of management as well. And when we're talking about reasonable steps, we're talking about how your policies and procedures look, that they're actually bring in line with the areas of the Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Act around making sure that discrimination or prohibited conduct that staff don't engage in. So as you can see under Section 3, if your organisation does not comply with this section, you could be liable for the contravention of the Act. And what we would mean there, if someone in your organisation has been racially vilified and that behaviour has kept on going and nothing has been done with that, obviously that individual could make a complaint to us at Equal Opportunity. It could lead that there could be some compensation or other forms of negotiation that might come out of that conciliation process. So a really important one to remember, and that's why organisations do have that obligation to understand the Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Act. These are the 3 areas when a complaint comes in that the Commissioner is looking at. So it's about less favourable treatment, treating someone differently. It's based on an attribute, maybe race or gender. And where has it actually happened? Has it happened in employment? Has it happened in maybe a service that you're accessing, say through like a health service? So this is what we look at when we enter in looking at somebody's complaint. Is it actually going to fit within the criteria of the Act? Where is it unlawful to discriminate? Very clear, paid or voluntary employment, education and training. Goods and services could be things like a health service. It could be around using an aged care facility if it was residential or business. That could be a hotel. It could be a B&B, membership to activities or clubs, things like a scouting club or a sports club. Any program that we fund as a state government around the process of those organisations, as well as maybe the information that they're putting out as well, that it shouldn't be discriminating against people. Also, awards, enterprise agreements and industrial agreements are covered as well. So lots of people get really shocked when we show them around the protected attributes that we have in Tasmania. We have a comprehensive act in Tasmania. These are the 22 areas that are covered under the Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Act. There has been 3 new inclusions since 2014 and an update in May 2019. So sexual orientation, that's about who we're attracted to. So that covers off on homosexuality, heterosexuality and bisexuality. When we're talking about gender identity, that has also been included. So we can say gender identity is male and female, but under the Act, it's looking at that continuum. Some people may identify later on as in life, maybe they were born female, but maybe they identify as male. Some people may actually feel like they don't identify with either or. Those people may call themselves non-binary. We also have included intersex variations of sex characteristics. Intersex variation is nothing new in our society. People have been born with different sex characteristics since time immemorial. But specifically under the Act, that classifies a person who identifies as female or male and may speak or have mannerisms that are different to their sex at birth or atypical for their gender. People whose sex at birth is not clear or have variations in reproductive or hormonal levels. So again, it's actually understanding those things. It could be that you'll be working with people who may be transitioning through their workplace. So they may be, you may have known them as being female, but they may transition to male during their working life. So again, about being respectful language, and you know, that the general issues that go with that. So other areas that come up quite a lot is irrelevant criminal record. Now we do have a really good brochure on that, but all of these things, I suppose, within this short time frame of us speaking about this, is important that if you are actually asked to do a police check, that that's all up front. It's part of that selection criteria for the job. Same with the medical record. It's not based on what somebody looks like. It's not based on maybe different people being asked different questions. So pretty clear, but again, there's a whole lot of different things that actually come into all the different attributes as well. So we also look at conduct that offends, humiliates, insults or ridicule on the basis of specific attributes. That's based on the first 14 of the attributes that you've just seen. So anything that could be language, it could be insulting, it could be ridiculing someone. Sexual harassment is based on unwelcome and unwanted behaviour. Inciting hatred and serious contempt for someone is based on a public act that humiliates and intimidates, insults someone. So that could be maybe yelling at somebody in a workplace, and that is specific to race, disability, sexual orientation, lawful sexual activity, religious belief or affiliation, gender identity or intersex variation of sex characteristics. We also have causing or aiding and inducing discrimination. It's actually bringing maybe a colleague along to actually participate in discriminative behaviour. One of the big areas that we're seeing at the moment is advertising or promoting discrimination or prohibited conduct, specifically around social media. Again, really important to remember in your workplace that if you start slagging off your staff members on social media, again, that could lead to you getting a complaint. It could lead to maybe a pointy end of being dismissed. Now, there has been a few cases through the Fair Work Commission now on that, so it is being upheld. And of course, under the Act, victimisation under the Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Act means that you can't be victimised if you're going to make a complaint or you're putting in a complaint, and maybe that you're getting support from somebody in your workplace and they get victimised, so they could make a complaint that they were being victimised for supporting you. So really important things to actually remember that. Make sure you have a look at your code of conduct and your policies to make sure that these areas are all covered. One of the areas that has become a really big area is around sexual harassment. And when we talk about unwanted and unwelcome, they can be jokes or comments of sexual nature. It could be brushing up against somebody. It could be actually maybe asking someone for sexual favours, probing too much about their personal life as well. One of the things that we really have to speak a lot about in workplaces is making sure when you're having a social event as part of your work, that people understand that you're still bound by your code of conduct, because we see a lot of sexual harassment complaints from maybe social events at workplaces. Now, in 2018, through the Sex Discrimination Commission, which is part of the Australian Human Rights Commission, they do a study every 5 years. They interviewed 10,000 workers across Australia. So what we saw in the workplace in the last 12 months was 23% of women and 16% of men have experienced sexual harassment. So it is quite a large cohort of people. What we have actually seen, what has come out of this study, was that there has been an increase in 18 to 29-year-olds reporting sexual harassment within the workplace. What we've seen with that is that predominantly the perpetrators of sexual harassment across all ages is 79% of the perpetrators are men. It was interesting with the study with younger people, the 18 to 29-year-old cohort. We had an increase in young men reporting sexual harassment. It was 26% out of this 10,000 people survey that young men actually reported sexual harassment. Again, this had been perpetrated by other men, and it was things like language, behaviour, maybe it was touching as well. But what we see, it is the differential between that issue of someone being in a more powerful position. One of the things that came out of this study too in the last 5 years, that 81% of employees in the information and media and telecommunication industry, the arts industry, reported sexual harassment. And we actually have seen an increase in people in the mining industry reporting sexual harassment. And again, the reason why there's been a larger reporting has been that there's been more women entering that industry. One of the things that is important, and that's why we talk about how can we make a healthy workplace, is around if you've witnessed sexual harassment. In this study, the majority of cases, 69% of the witnesses did not intervene. So really important about that standby response, asking the person if they're okay, maybe actually challenging the person who's doing that behaviour, maybe looking at it in a broader context about doing some training with your teams on that, having the conversation in your staff meetings. If you're not having staff meetings, that's a problem about how communication is going across your organisation. I would recommend if you can have them fortnightly or monthly is a really, really good thing. But one of the things that we saw within this report, that 1 in 5 people actually only make a formal report, so only 17%. And the reason why, people felt that they would get further victimisation, be named up as a troublemaker, or they actually resigned because of it. But again, looking at that information, this report you can download from the Australian Human Rights Commission as well if you're interested to read further. So workplace bullying is a safety matter. It's a psychological health and safety matter. We fix plugs, electric plugs and tiles, but sometimes we actually let bullying behaviours go by. We don't actually challenge the bully or the behaviours that are going with that. So it's an important one to remember. Under the Work Health Safety Act of 2012, workplace bullying is defined as repeated and unreasonable behaviour directed towards a worker or a group of workers that create a risk to health and safety. It's a huge issue. It's very costly within our businesses. One of the things that came out of a report in 2016, over $8 billion is shelled out because of bullying behaviours within the workplace. So it's really creating a lot of absenteeism and low productivity in workplaces. Some of the examples of workplace bullying, one of the things that we see a lot is offensive language, swearing in the workplace. I'm not trying to be the fun police here, but sometimes we have to really curb our language. Is it actually okay about what we're doing? Unjustifiable criticisms. Excluding someone is probably the main thing that we see, not saying hello, ignoring people, not inviting them to meetings, not giving them work is also a thing. So that's a really important one. Spreading misinformation or malicious rumour is also an issue around bullying as well. What can you do? You can do self-management, speak to the person whose behaviour is unacceptable if you feel safe to do so. That one-on-one approach is a really important thing to do. You may not feel that you can actually do that. Maybe you seek some support from your contact officer. Maybe you actually make an appointment with your EAP to get some further advice or just support about how you're going to tackle it. You may feel that you want to speak to your supervisor and manager to have an informal conversation with the person that you've had the issue with. Or it could be that you need to do a more formal process where it's investigated, it's written up, and there's a formal outcome. That could be that that person could be performance managed. It could be that that would lead to the pointy end. Maybe that person may be terminated from their employment. So important ones to actually really think about. Again, you can go externally anytime. We would advise that you do try and use your internal policies, but again, it may not be a safe thing for you to do. And again, you can call us at Equal Opportunity Tasmania. You could also contact the Australian Human Rights Commission, Fair Work, or WorkSafe as well. So again, it's really worth to get some advice around what you should do. You could also get advice from your union. If you have contact officers, they can't give you advice, but they can give you information about the processes that you could use. So really important to have that information there. So your rights at work, and again, we're really looking at that whole premise of about being respected. Everyone has the right to work. Everyone has the right to work in an environment free from discrimination and unsafe behaviours. Your responsibilities, and we do have a responsibility like the standby response. It's actually also good to be aware of your generalizations and judgments, and we've called those our personal bias. How do we actually challenge those? Think about the inappropriate jokes or comments and maybe stories that come up within your workplace. Is that actually really bringing people in as a team? Is it actually maybe isolating somebody within the workplace? So challenge discriminatory attitudes in the workplace is really important as well, because going back to what this whole discussion has been about, how do we make our workplaces healthy? And one of the ways for us to do that is actually look at our own behaviours, look at our team behaviours, make sure that we actually have policies and procedures that really fit within the criteria of the Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Act, and really act in that way that really supports people in their working life. They're all really important things to do. So thank you. So we've finished at 10:30, so open to questions.
All right, thank you, Jenny. And as Jenny mentioned, yes, if you would like to now submit any questions to Jenny in respect to healthy workplace understanding discrimination, your rights and responsibilities, you can do so by typing your questions into the questions pane in your attendee control panel. So one question, Jenny, is you mentioned that bullying can be lodged as a complaint through Equal Opportunity Tasmania. However, it wasn't identified as one of the attributes. How do I go about lodging a complaint if I wanted to on bullying through Equal Opportunity Tasmania?
I thank you for that. It's a very good point that you've brought up, and it is, without getting into all the differences with the Act, bullying fits under prohibited conduct, so it would have to fit with humiliation, intimidation and insults, and it would have to be based on a specific attribute, so the first 14 from race right up to disability. So it would have to fit within an attribute, and it would have to be behaviour that specifically offends, humiliates, intimidates or insults. It has been difficult under the Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Act that we have promoted a lot around bullying, but per se it's not specific as an attribute because it fits within somebody's race, and it fits into that prohibited conduct. Again, it would be worth, if you were having issues in your workplace, you can give us a call. We have an inquiry desk from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. You can also email us as well. It may be worth to look at, you might be worth to look at WorkSafe Tasmania to make a complaint, but you certainly could be looking at Equal Opportunity as making a complaint, because ours doesn't have to be repeated. It can be a one-off incident. So if you have an attribute with it, if it fits into that prohibited conduct around humiliation, intimidating, insulting or ridicule, then that could be a case that the complaint would get up.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. Another question. If I choose to make a complaint to Equal Opportunity, is my complaint confidential?
Yes, it is. It is confidential in the sense the process that you would go through. Your complaint, obviously, if it's against we call them the respondent, they would be aware of the complaint, obviously. If it goes to conciliation, some people do ask for what the outcome comes out of that between the two parties to be kept confidential and private. So there can be clauses when you've reached that final that part where you've actually made an agreement. Maybe it's about getting a certain amount of money because you are unfairly dismissed, that is actually kept confidential. So it is kept, it can be.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. So there is still time for people to submit questions to Jenny for today's webinar. Another question that has come through, Jenny, if I lodge a complaint to Equal Opportunity Tasmania in respect to an individual in my organisation, does the organisation find out about that complaint?
Absolutely. The process that goes through would be, I mean, again, it would have to fit within those three criteria that I spoke about in the beginning around does it have an attribute? Has someone been treated less favourably than someone else? So has it been that direct discrimination based on a attribute characteristic, where has it actually happened. So that would be the first place where if you were going to be making a complaint, you can see all our complaint forms. You can ring us up. Like I said before, we have an inquiry desk. We really encourage people to ring us first, maybe talk about the issue that has actually gone on. And of course, the process that we actually use, if the complaint is going to be looked at, then there is a complaint process that goes through. It's usually a 6-monthly process. It can be resolved in early conciliation, like the two parties may actually come into agreement quite early on, or it could be looked at for further investigation. So again, there's a range of processes that we actually use, but to answer your question, yes, of course, those people, the organisation, the employer would be notified if the complaint got up, and for them to actually send in documentation as well about the issue that had gone on.
Okay, thank you, Jennie. Another question, what happens if my complaint doesn't fit within one of the attributes or areas under the Act?
And that's a very good question as well, so thank you for that. That's why it's a great idea to call up our inquiry desk. You can talk to our conciliation officers, who are our legal officers. They can't give you advice, but they can give you information. If they believe that it's certainly not going to fit within the criteria of the Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Act, they would be referring you to other agencies, and that could be to the Fair Work Commission. If you work for the State Service, it could be referring to the Tasmanian Industrial Commission. It could be that maybe the jurisdiction doesn't fit within the Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Act, and they may send you to the Australian Human Rights Commission. But they would certainly help you to know the information where you could be referred to.
Okay, thank you, Jennie. So at this point in time, no other questions have come through. So we will start to wrap up today's webinar, but if you would like to get a final question in to ask Jennie from Equal Opportunity Tasmania, then please do so. So thank you, Jennie, from Equal Opportunity Tasmania for today's webinar, Healthy Workplace, Understanding Discrimination, Your Rights and Responsibilities. There is still time to register for other WorkSafe Month webinars and events, so please head to worksafetasmonth.com.au to register for other events which we are running up until the 31st of October. And also, once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, so we do appreciate your feedback. And on behalf of WorkSafe Tasmania and our presenter today, Jennie Gorringe from Equal Opportunity Tasmania, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.